Hi, this piece of news broke at least 6 decades ago. If you haven't caught up with this news, it is something that civil engineers and hydraulic engineers need to understand well. This lesson on pump characteristics is relatively important. Transient analysis in many cases is done to protect a water system from surges caused by pumps, starting, stopping, or varying their operating speed. The lesson aims to provide a sound understanding of pump characteristics in all pump operating zones. Most civil engineers and hydraulic engineers are familiar with the operation of pumps in the normal operating zone. Here, we are looking at a pump curve supplied by a pump manufacturer. Below the pump's head versus flow curve are the pump efficiency curves. One curve for the pump and one for the combined pump plus motor. This is the type of data used by WATAM for initial steady-state analysis. In steady-state analysis, a pump curve is defined by 3 data points. The central point is intended to be the pump's rated point, that is, its best efficiency point. A low-flow data point and a high-flow data point complete the definition of the pump's characteristics used for steady-state simulation. Users typically select the position of the low-flow and high-flow data points to enclose the range of normal steady-state operating conditions. This lesson will, however, unfold the reality of the 4 operating zones because when it comes to transient simulation, limiting our view of pumps to the normal zone is only sufficient in situations where a non-return valve is installed in the pump delivery pipe and where the pump's role is to lift water from a lower hydraulic level to a higher destination. For transient simulations, WATAM accepts the reality that a pump may operate in 4 zones, with the zones defined in terms of pump flow and pump rotating speed. The normal zone is defined as cases where the pump is rotating in the forward direction with a positive flow delivered through the pump. The dissipation zone is defined as cases where the pump is rotating in the forward direction with reverse flow through the pump. For this to occur, the water system has control of the flow, not the pump. However, the motor is still turned on and rotating. The turbine zone is defined as cases with reverse flow through the pump and the pump is rotating in the reverse direction. The danger associated with this zone is entering it unintentionally after operating in the dissipation zone. How can that happen? It can happen when the torque imposed on the impeller by the water flowing backward through the casing is greater than the torque delivered by the motor. Imagine the damaging shock load on the mechanical drivetrain when the pump suddenly reverses direction with power still applied to the motor, trying it to turn the impeller in the forward direction. This is why pump installations have a delivery non-return valve to prevent the pump operating in the dissipation zone or the turbine zone after the non-return valve has closed. Please note and remember what I just said then, after the non-return valve has fully closed, because non-return valves all take a finite time to close. The 4th and final operating zone is called the reverse speed dissipation zone. This zone is defined as cases where the flow is in the forward direction while the pump rotates in a reverse direction. It is not immediately obvious where the reverse speed dissipation zone fits or how it can occur. It is easier to understand the reverse speed dissipation zone by looking at the 4 operating zones in a more familiar format. We will take a closer look at that zone in a later lesson. Here is a graph of the 4 zones expressed in terms of flow versus head, except that it is not scaled as absolute flow rates and heads. It is scaled in terms of dimensionless ratios. The graph depicts normalized flow as the flow rate divided by the pump's rated flow. Similarly, head is expressed in normalized terms, as head divided by the pump's rated head. This lesson presents 3 sets of data from the research of Benjamin Donsky. It is the result of Donsky's work in 1961 that is seen here in these graphs. The 3 data sets represent the generic characteristics in all 4 zones of a centrifugal pump, a mixed flow pump, and an axial flow pump. When a pump's data is presented this way, the shape of the curve can represent pumps in a single class of pumps, based on their specific speed. For example, all axial flow pumps have roughly the same specific speed. All pumps of the mixed flow class have roughly the same specific speed, and similarly for centrifugal pumps. In this style of representing a pump curve, the pump's rated point sits here at the value 1 on both axes. The green line represents the normal zone. Civil engineers and hydraulic engineers mostly focus on pump operation in this one zone, the normal zone. The red line represents the dissipation zone. The blue line represents the turbine zone. Note that it requires more head-to-force reverse flow through a pump with the impeller rotating forward in the dissipation zone, compared to rotating the impeller backward, for example, with the motor off in the turbine zone. I'm going to end this session by repeating the breaking news, just in case you missed it. And this is what they look like for a typical centrifugal pump.